Hi, welcome to the Indie Wine Podcast. My name is Matt Wood, and this is episode 87. Today's the second in our series of panels from the Unfiltered Conversations About Wine panels. Terroir is the theme of the day. Pick dates, handling, pressing, fermenting, aging. There are just so many decisions and variables, and each one can nudge the flavor just a little bit further from its original profile. So is terroir really a thing, and is it an important thing, and can you really taste it? These were some of the questions posed to the panel. Jared Brandt of Donkey and Goat moderated the panel. Dr. Kurtral returned for another panel, along with Kristy Tacey from Tessier Wines. Darek Trowbridge of Old World Winery also returns as a panelist, along with William Allen from Two Shepherds and Shaunt Oungoulian of Leslunes and Populis Wines. If you haven't heard the first panel discussion, it's really worth listening to also and can give you some more background on the festival itself. Quick reminder that I have a Patreon at patreon.com/indiewinepodcast. The link is in the show notes also. If you're enjoying the podcast, any amount to help me keep telling wine stories ad-free and available for everyone is appreciated. It's all run independent and out of pocket. Telling a friend or sharing on social media are great ways to help out too. Here we go.
Okay, if everybody can get seated, I'd love to start. What I'd like to do is everybody's going to introduce themselves quickly. And then I have a series of questions, some aimed at specific people, some more broad. And then if we get done quickly enough, I'd love audience questions. The topic today is terroir. I am Jared Brandt. In 2001, I was in New York. I had to lay off like 40 people from an office. And I flown out to lay off this whole team, and I hated it. And I got really drunk that night, and then went to work for a guy named Eric Tessier because I had his wine that night. I moved to France and worked for Eric for a year. And Eric was a very big believer in terroir with some very specific concepts, which we might go through today. And I came back and started Donkey Goat 20 years ago. And thank you for the clap. And then my lovely friend, Andrew, who I keep giving credit to because he deserves it. I don't know where he went. He was just here a second. Andrew had this idea, because Andrew and I like to sit around and drink and talk about wine. And we decided to have conversations about wine. There's Andrew. So thank you, Andrew, for organizing all this. I'm going to let each of you introduce yourself. Go ahead.
Hot mic. I'm Kristy, owner and winemaker of Tessier Winery, Kristy Tacey. Thanks. I've been making wine for 16 years. Before that, I was a scientist. I have a degree in biology. And I worked as a research scientist for 10 years and then switched careers, started Tessier in 2009, and just moved to the block last year, which I'm really excited about. A year and a half. Oh, and I made wine here too. Yeah, that's true. So I made the 2023 vintage here at Donkey and Goat. Jared got me down to the Berkeley area, although I lived here, and then found out about the space on 4th Street and swooped in.
My name is Kurtral. Andrew invited me to the panel, so thank you for the invitation. I have an academic background. I was the viticulturist at UC Davis for a number of years. I also ran the Oakville Research Station in Napa County, as well as our statewide extension, mainly focused on wine grapes. But currently, this is before the current administration came on board. I saw the light and left academia. We have our own vineyard and winery in Solano County. We still live in a farm in Davis. So I'm here.
Everybody, thanks for coming. I'm Darek Trowbridge. I have a little brand called Old World Winery. Been farming for about 35 years. And I was getting a master's degree in winemaking. And I was like, oh my God, I hate this shit. And so I went back to natural and I started a natural wine brand in 1998 as a little art project, because no one was going to pay me to do that. But now that's a whole different world. So I've been doing that for a while. And super excited to be here with you and talk about terroir and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I'm Shaunt Oungoulian. Thanks for having me today. I got my start in winemaking after I got a degree in chemistry at UC Berkeley. That was back in 2008. Worked a couple years. Went to UC Davis to get a degree in viticulture and enology. Actually really liked it. So I don't know if that says more about me or something, but then moved to France for a couple of years, worked for folks, and then came back in 2014 to start Leslunes and Populis, which I make now with my good friend and partner, Diego Warrig. So Leslunes, those are grapes that we make from vineyards that we farm throughout Sonoma and Napa counties. And then Populis are from grapes that we buy Mendocino County, Lodi, and a little bit in the Sierra foothills too.
Strangle myself. Hey, William Allen with Two Shepherds. I started making wine commercially for the brand in 2010. No clue what I was doing. Was actually at his place, which ironically, I now have a farm and vineyard about 2 miles away from Darek. You think we lived in separate countries? We see each other usually at a wine fair somewhere on the road. So we do grow 2 varieties on our property now. Kind of like Darek, I went and started taking some classes at Davis actually after I was commercial and realized there was no way I was getting through any of this shit. So just stick to being self-taught.
My first question, and I have some that I said are for specific people. This is a general question. Anybody can speak up. But maybe more, some of the people with the science degrees will speak more to this. I want just a little conversation. When we think of terroir, I think of it in terms of like there's a scientific or maybe environmental aspect of terroir. And I think Andrew's going to pour the next wine. And actually, I'll explain that first wine for a reason. I also think there is probably a lot of cultural aspects to terroir. So I think of it both ways, but I wanted to talk about the science for a little bit. And before I talk about it, the first wine I poured for you guys to think about terroir, hopefully everybody, when they came in, they got a little bit of Lily's Pet Nat. It's Anderson Valley Chardonnay. The wine that we poured initially in here was the exact same vineyard, picked about a week later, made as a still wine. And I think it's really interesting because I always think of that vineyard, it's called the Konzelman Vineyard, as being Lily's, and that's the terroir, but it's not. It's the Chardonnay and the aspects of a lot of fog because it's the deep end of the valley. And you can explain your wine in a second. It's being poured right now. Okay, so my question is, do any of you think that, like, when you think about soils, like we all have soil maps, we all talk about soils, how much do you think the soil and the pH of the soil translate, and really specifically about the soil, into the wine? And any of you guys can go first.
So unfortunately, I was trained as an agronomist, so I'll take my first shot at it. Damn it. Soil pH has a huge effect on how these elements are released from the soil. The biggest influencer is potassium. So if you look at a lot of our coastal soils, if you go from like a little north of Sacramento going into Napa County, you're going to get a lot of serpentine soils with very high pH, with very high magnesium, which will not release potassium and calcium. Likewise, your water quality also has the same untoward effect as well. So these all have to be amended. I mean, we do amend it tremendously. Growers will, inject sulfuric acid to release these things. So terroir in these very tough to farm soils is, kind of difficult to talk about, in my opinion. But, I also split a lot of my time in Davis between Bordeaux and Davis. So if you go to Bordeaux, a lot of those soils are going to be tiled. So that's another thing we can talk about as well, influencing, how much water these soils can give later in the season. So yeah, but soil pH has a tremendous effect. But if you go to Oakville, you have soils that are pH 5.5. So that's the other end of the spectrum.
What do you think? And then you should go next. What do you think the pH, like how do you think that expresses in the terroir? Is it just amended and there's no such thing as terroir in that case?
I mean, proof is in the pudding. You have $12,000 a ton grapes versus $600 a ton grapes. So I'll leave it at that.
That's very provocative. Um, so I love the question because it really, I would kind of have to define the question a little bit first, because are we talking about like growing parameters, or, what is terroir? And to me, when I was thinking about what I would say on this panel, not understanding what we're going to do, I was thinking that I would say, that we're talking about taste, right? So it's terroir is like what we all can taste. And so it's really hard, I think, for me to put something in front of you and say, this is what that tastes like. I'm really into the taste of the place. Deciding what that is in the other hand is really hard, and putting a finger on it. And the nuance, like I farm 7 different sites, all different soils. Some of them have 3 different soil types. And I mean, can I put my finger on any of those flavors of soil? Not really. What I brought is a I brought something else. So I'll talk about that later. But I think volcanic soil is the most obvious. But otherwise, I just think soil is too subtle for my palate to notice. And when I failed wanting to be, I got my master's degree, but I didn't want to be that. I realized that taking devices and deciding what something is and bringing it down to a number was no longer important to me, because my great-grandfather and my grandfather didn't do that. So it couldn't mean that's the only way you could do it is use numbers. And so then I brought everything to my palate, because the palate's a highly sensitive organism and it can notice many things. But can I tell you what soil it's in? No, maybe some psalms can, but that's not for me. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think similarly to Darek, I'm not trying to say or get super granular. So for me, it's like, how do you look at the differences and trying to minimize, say, the variable? So let's look at places that have somewhat similar climates, but extremely different soil types. So something that Diego and I have noticed and talked about is our Old Vine Carignan in Mendocino County versus the Old Vine Carignan that he worked with in Fougères at Domaine Leon Barral. So that's over there. It's on a very heavy clay limestone soil. Up in Mendocino County, it's kind of gravelly loam that's from decomposed, the coastal range. So a much lighter, loamier soil. And, we've noticed the differences in the wines, that Southern French wine, very heavy, very powerful, big tannins. Whereas the wines from Mendocino County on this lighter, loamy soil, it's much more less extraction, brighter fruit, not quite as dark and not quite as heavy of the tannin structure that you saw out there. And, I've talked to some people, they will explain the differences, cation exchange capacity and these other kind of more technical things. But I think trying to look at, again, what are the global, big differences, like a heavy limestone, low pH clay versus a higher pH loam soil, and kind of see the two differences is interesting and illustrative.
I'm kind of more in the Darek camp, and Deck's a little loaded with a PhD from Davis, so it's a little growing. But I think a lot of consumers struggle with the concept of terroir, and I think we tend to immediately associate it with dirt. And in my mind, and the more I do and experience things, it's a lot more than dirt, frankly. It's important. In Sonoma County, I think we have at least 7 terms for clay soil, kind of like how Eskimos have for snow, just to try and make clay sound super interesting, because we don't have decomposed granite and we don't have schist and this and that. But I mean, I only have a 1 acre property, and the soil profile on the left versus the right is completely different. You don't really taste soil in grapes. You taste the impact of how that soil grows and what the pH does. It's been, somebody might argue with him, I'm sure, but like, because something grows in a certain thing, you don't get limestone flavors into the character of the wine, but you get what that soil profile does. But if you look at, to me, pro terroir is also these days Mother Nature, right? 2020, the year of fires. 2022, the year of 115 degrees over 10 days. 2023, the year nothing but ripen. 2024, the year that started like 2023, and then we had 3 weeks at 100 degrees. I think one of the biggest things in California we don't talk about that I've learned to appreciate, and it dawned on me when I was in Spain 3 or 4 years ago, is Most of California does not have sexy soils, especially in Napa and Sonoma. But we do have what they don't have in most of Europe, which is a diurnal shift, right? Even in Yolo County, where it's 110 degrees during the day, the temperature drops 40 to 50 degrees at night. I'm sitting in a vineyard in Spain, and it's 100 degrees during the day, and it's 90 degrees at night. And that impact, which unfortunately gets lost in the potential by most of the conventional California winemaking, but the impact to watch the grape chemistry shift during the day and go up with sugar and down in acid and then completely flip-flop. And the fact that we're able to pick at 5 o'clock in the morning when it's 40, 50, 60 degrees, and there's parts of the world, there's no such thing as cool picking. So I think terroir is definitely soil, but for me, it's vintage, it's sense of place. The fact that you should be able to taste a sense of place, that's going to be different from vintage to vintage. And then what we do, we express that, right? Because most wineries completely crush that, including people that grow organically. And then the second the grapes come into the winery, the chock full of chemical shit starts going in before they even know why they're doing that. So
I'm going to give you my take a little bit. I actually think soil has a huge impact on terroir, personally. I think that not all soils, but a lot of California soils, I think, are kind of not distinct. But I do think the decomposed granite of the foothills actually has some very specific flavors that is part of that terroir. And yeah, we don't have the Chateauneuf de Pop. I think they're called galettes, the big stones, which I think has a huge impact on that terroir. It holds the heat. But I actually do think there's a big impact of soil. Going to lead me to the next question, and I'm actually going to start with you because of your background. And you can first explain the wine, but then answer this question. So what do you think microbiology plays in terroir? So do you think the vineyard, I think we all typically work with organic grapes. I've seen different vineyards have very specific fermentations, which I think is from the yeast. But where does the microbiology play in the terroir? And like, when you think about it, think about both also, since you're next door now and you made wine here. Years ago, I had a woman who was an intern who was a PhD student at Davis, and she studied our yeast. And the internal terroir yeast here is actually Trumer yeast. Since we have a big brewery right over there, we can talk about indigenous yeast all we want, but it's really Trumer who's influencing us.
So the wine that's going around right now is the 2021 Santa Cruz Mountains Pinot Noir from Severia Vineyard. I started making Pinot Noir in the beginning. I was really obsessed with it, just all the subtlety and complexity of it. Santa Cruz Mountains is one of my favorite areas for Pinot Noir. This one is down by the Monterey Bay. And so lots of coastal fog, sandy soils. It is a blend of clones. And I do always a little bit of whole cluster and native ferments, and then aged in neutral French oak, so you can really taste the fruit. I always get a lot of pomegranate. So microbiology in the soil. I mean, it's important, I think, with organic farming to have a lot of different organisms growing in there. I think that's helpful for the soil. And when we visited Alsace, there were, like strawberries, wild strawberries, flowers, everything, where I don't see that as much here, I guess. I haven't seen strawberries in a California vineyard, but just that helps with the soil add different nutrients because it's a community, and the community is helpful for the soils. Yeah, I think it definitely, it probably helps to break down the soils more and lets the plants uptake it.
I'm so glad it's that question, because again, it's sort of, is it still? Yeah. As we were seeing on this end, is of soil definitely it's impactful, but climate and microbiology maybe more so. If we're talking about a triad in the terroir definition, it's those three, and soil being the least, in my personal opinion. And if we go back to UC Davis, for good, bad, or indifferent, they showed that terroir, what we call terroir, is 98% microbiology. So, I mean, just think about that for a minute. 98%. These 98% microbiology. And in that, we're talking about the microbiology that's on the skins. And the reason why this is the number one thing to me is because those skins have anywhere from 25 to 35 different species of yeast and bacteria. Actually, just yeast, bacteria plus those numbers. And so what you're getting there, and I'll tell you about this wine in a second, but what you're getting there is even in an undulation. So we got a vineyard that's going, it's got a tip, and then it goes down to a bottomland, and then it comes up, so not flat. But just in those areas, those blocks will taste wildly different. Same variety, same rootstock, and maybe even similar soil. And so it's the climate, it's the aspect to the sun, and it's the microbiology. That's what decides what microbiology grows on those skins. And so what concentration of those 25 species will grow more. So like in one vineyard, I might have more of one of those species than the other, and there's some of the difference in flavors. And I brought this wine for a different reason, though, since I'll just mention that and then I'll shut up, so we got time for everybody. But so microbiology is really important to me. This wine, this microbiology is from 85-year-old vines. They've been hanging out there for that long. My great-grandfather planted them. It's a Boreau. It's a Basque variety that came here in the 1800s. This is the last remaining contiguous block of it. It's found in field blends and some other places where I've given budwood to people, but this is the last one. They're old vines. And well, the reason why I brought this was in the conversation with Terroir, there's other interplay, and you may have these questions, but I'll invoke that at some point, maybe not right now. One of the interplays, the interplay here is on companion planting and how those affect flavor. And that's meaning eucalyptus trees. And in one case, this wine, the brother of this wine, Isabel Legeron, was up visiting me, and she was tasting it. And she goes, "Do you have English? No, shit. What's it called? We call it wild carrot. What are the something lace? Queen Anne's lace. Queen Anne's lace. I don't know about Queen Anne's lace, but what she actually wore. But anyway." So this is a plant that comes up about this high. It creates a really strongly smelling seed, and that's in this wine. And like, I can understand how eucalyptus trees have oils that come down and get on there, and I have that in a couple other vineyards, and I love them. But I wish someone would explain to me how this smell and taste is coming up into that canopy upwards, and so that is gonna, I'll leave us there for now, and maybe I'll make another conclusion about that later.
Yeah, I believe that microbiology is hugely important, and that speaks towards, organic and farming with an idea towards soil health. So the vines, and actually a lot of plants themselves, the fine roots, they're good at picking up water and nitrogen and maybe potassium, but much less so phosphorus and other micronutrients. And they themselves aren't really doing the work of decomposing the base parent material of the soil. That's all the microbes and fungus and bacteria and things like that happening in the dirt itself. And so in order to kind of cultivate differences, it's important to have a living, vibrant soil, because otherwise it's kind of just a growth medium that you're feeding with fertilizers, water, etc. So then you're not really getting a much distinct character from the various types of parent material that the vineyards are planted on.
Okay. I'm going to switch to a very different set of questions. I had a third scientific question, but it's still, I only have a half hour left. Okay, so Richard Betts, who's married to a friend of mine, wrote, and I don't remember the exact year. I got up earlier this morning and tried to find it online, and I couldn't find it. But he wrote an article that said orange wine is like drinking Tecate, and that Tecate was actually better. And his argument one of his arguments in this article, I think it was in Fortune magazine, was that orange wine negates terroir. So I'm just curious, like, we're going to switch obviously to cultural issues, but any thoughts, feedback, as winemaking changes? Does terroir change, or does our concept of terroir change, or is Richard Betts actually in fact right that orange wine negates terroir?
So I'd love to argue with Roni from Roni Selects that red wine is crude, disgusting, and the maceration, it obfuscates the terroir. This is a joke. I'm kind of joking here. It's like, I obviously don't agree with that statement, but I think it does introduce, the maceration does introduce a lot more interaction and decisions from the winemaker producing it. Whereas I think there's something about, say, a white wine that's you press the grapes and you put the grapes in a tank and it ferments, and it's just this pure extraction of the soil itself. That's a very romanticized version, but that was, I like to joke with her that it was like, this crude beverage that we drink here in California and in other places like that. But again, I think it, because then you get into ideas of, how long is the maceration? Are you leaving stems? Are you not? And it again introduces a lot more of the winemaker's input, which has a lot of impact on flavor, and can then the person is much more involved, which again is a huge impact, or a part of the idea of terroir.
So terroir would only be expressed with a very the first press of a white wine.
That was my joke, for sure.
It's okay. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I'd love to just offer something on that too. So you got like carbonic maceration, in my opinion, does eliminate terroir. And
can you expand on that? I actually fully agree with you.
Yeah, well, it's a winemaking technique. It's a tool. It's the taste of the winery. Not necessarily the taste of the place, even though it's combined with the taste of the place. So it's a technique, and I'll leave it there. I mean,
I will actually be more direct. I think carbonic wine tastes the same no matter where it's made in the world. I think it's bullshit wine, personally. And we make some carbonic here, but whatever.
Right on. I mean, my palate doesn't love it, so I definitely am in your camp. And it's funny because you take that and you go, okay, then go take orange wine. There's a lot of different levels of orange wine spectrum, same as reds, right? There's rosés and reds. And so if you take a Quevry orange wine, that's a very different wine than my 5-day skin stem macerated Chardonnay. That, I think, has terroir. The Quevry maybe takes it somewhere where people don't think it has terroir. But if the Quevry was made there nearby and it's in that winery where the guy's done it forever, to me, that's also terroir. So it gets into what is the definition of terroir? Are you tasting the place? Well, you're at the guy's place, the vineyard's there, and it's in a Quevry. So I would offer that that's also terroir to me.
I was going to speak in more on orange wine, although I'm bristling over the carbonic, but I'm going to stifle that one. If anybody's ever had our Wiley carbonic, you can woo. I would agree with Beck's statement if you consider classic orange wine. So I've been probably only second to you here, making orange wines since 2010, and now make 5 orange wines. Even though it's not my favorite category, it's the largest color that I make. And if you look at traditional orange wines from the country of Georgia, northern Italy, and the extended macerations that were common, I mean, the resemblance of grapes, let alone terroir, is gone. It doesn't make it bad. We were one of the early ones starting to make lighter style orange wines. And one of the constant comments we get when we go on the road is like, I can taste that it's Fermentino. It may have been on the skins for 10 days, but because it was picked lighter and things like, and I've monkeyed with everything along the way, stems, no stems, partial whole cluster, and to get to a point where we felt like, one, it was orange wines that were approachable for new generations of wine drinkers, which I felt was important, that you're not a master sommelier trying to understand Georgian orange wine as well. But that's again, where one winemaker influence can completely change and mask terroir or enhance it.
The idea of carbonic maceration, I think of Beaujolais particularly, where that's maybe the one region where it's not quite as marked, and so that's something I think about a lot. And I haven't really myself come up with a good solution or heard one from many other people that they can do these cold carbonic macerations that do really express the distinctive, crus, throughout there, and are so wildly different than when I do a carbonic maceration on a Zinfandel in California. You really taste that. But then tasting a nice Morgon or Fleury or something, it's like taste of that place, and is a very interesting question.
Well, I mean, I feel like, red wine is skin contact, just like a white wine is skin contact making orange wine. It's kind of the same thing. So I don't really think it's fair.
Anything?
I don't know. I don't have much good to say about orange wines myself either, so I'll leave it at that. No, I mean, it comes with the sense of place. I mean, you have the soil, the environment, and in addition to the fauna on the skins, you have the fungi and the soil as well, and that also has brought on a lot of nice aspects to it to extract some of these components from the soil. We did quite a bit of work with arbuscular mycorrhizae fungi, and we were able to get a lot of these phosphorus compounds into the grape plants themselves. But how they express themselves in the wine, that remains to be seen. I was not able to discern a taste.
So when I was preparing for this panel, I was trying to think of who first started marketing terroir and wine. So when I think of Robert Mondavi, you guys have all had Mondavi wines. He, as far as I'm concerned, invented, among other things, lifestyle marketing for wines, right? So there was a golden retriever, a big chateau, and blah, blah, blah. And that was Napa, which has done very well as a result. Give him a lot of credit. As a winemaker, I've always struggled with talking about terroir because if I go to any large commercial winery who, from my perspective, obliterates terroir with chemicals, and again, I'm trying to be provocative. So how do you guys talk about terroir when you're talking to consumers with that kind of context? That, literally, if we went to Napa today or Sonoma, every tasting room we'd visit would talk about how their wines express their terroir.
I mean, commercial winemaking is all about removing differences between your fields. So, I mean, you have these 250,000 gallon tanks that may or may not have different loads dumped into it. So they have to coalesce all these differences. So talking about terroir in these large wine houses is a misnomer in my opinion. When you come to the much smaller estates, there you can get the sense of place, because having worked in both in Napa, Fresno, and Lodi areas throughout my career, I mean, everyone's essentially making the same wine at this point.
So, another thing, see if I can keep this mic going. Another thing that eliminates terroir is manufacturing. And most wine is manufactured. That's the reality. When I got a master's degree, that's what they taught me to do, just write work orders. I'm not supposed to actually get my hands dirty. And so I was I did exit stage right. No one here today is a manufacturing plant, but that does eliminate, not only through blending, but just through the whole process of, it becomes more like, you got to turn a tank over in 7 days. So it's a whole different mindset. And I tell people that the manufacturing eliminates the mystery. And I think that if I say anything that has any value today, hopefully it's that terroir is mystery, and that we shouldn't eliminate the mystery. If from this panel, we shouldn't have a full-on understanding of terroir, because it's not that understandable. As you can see, there's a lot of, there's a lot of details and things that are involved and how they affect flavor. And so I say, allow that mystery to be there. If you're manufacturing, you aren't doing that. And hopefully out there tasting today, you guys will see there's a lot of mystery.
But before you go, I want to just keep focusing on how do you contradict the marketing concept of terroir from these big manufacturing facilities?
How do I?
How do you explain terroir to a consumer when they've heard terroir as a giant manufactured winery next door?
I say it's mostly climate, the triad, mostly climate and microbiology, and then I explain how they eliminated microbiology. So that's the first offense. The second offense is manufacturing.
It makes me think of there's a quote from the late great Jonathan Goldstein, who's speaking more in food and restaurants. He would say, I don't really believe in authenticity, but I think about it a lot. And that's kind of maybe a similar way that I think about terroir is like, I don't know if I really believe in it, but I think about it a lot. And I think because it's been co-opted and you look at, the history of it, it's like, okay, I had this piece of property and I had more power over you. And I'm going to say these grapes and this wine is better than your wine, because I had this power. And I think a lot of times terroir is used in that way to say Napa's better than Mendocino, or Napa's better than Lodi, or, Vermont doesn't make good wines. And it's like, well, based on what and whose definition, and so it's important to consider those things too when you're talking about this idea or the concepts of terroir. And, I think trying to talk about it to people, I think of it more as like a distinctiveness and something that's compelling and something that can show through and is bigger than a person, a winery, a vintage, and that is speaking loud and clearly. So whether it's a vineyard that no matter who's making the grapes from it, you can tell it's this specific vineyard, or, certain regions have certain characteristics and things like that. And not really trying to make qualitative judgments of it, but realizing the distinctiveness of something.
Okay, so I think when you spend time in France, which I think probably everybody in this panel has, a lot of when French people, sometimes not all of them, but I'm going to make a generalization, which I apologize about, talked about terroir. A lot of it is about tradition. So if you think about Chablis arguably has been made about the same since about 1860, 1870. And you can argue further back than that, it was actually probably orange wine, but Chardonnay, grown in a very similar way, very similar vineyard management. And they talk about terroir as a combination of location and tradition. Can America have terroir when we don't have traditions? Like we're a very young winemaking country. Can California have terroir?
For sure. We have terroir. It's about climate, it's about soil. I mean, the Santa Cruz Mountain Pinot Noir has more pomegranate notes, where I used to make another Pinot Noir from Anderson Valley from Billy Green Farm. And that one is very mulberry. It's always hard because there's like different clones involved, but you can taste the difference. And it's a good experiment. Same winemaker, Pinot Noir from different regions. There's definitely terroir.
And let's be honest, we do have history. I tell everybody France has a 2,000-year head start on us, but 150 years isn't horrible. And there's this whole history pre-prohibition, that was ruined. That was all natural. Everything was natural pre-prohibition. It was the world wars that gave us better living through chemistry and the Green Revolution. Thank you very much. And so, there's it's all possible. But I love the interplay of, do we define terroir based on tradition? I think tradition's part of it, but it can't be the defining factor.
Well, and I think that's what's exciting about the time we're in now is, rather than copy and pasting someone else's tradition onto our landscape, we're in a moment of trying to discover, what really is our own tradition, and whether this sticks or not in 50 years or 100 years, I'm not sure. Because, as much as I was just talking smack about macerated wines, I think given our climate and soils, I find that some of my most compelling wines are red wines. And to an extent, now that we're doing maceration on different parcels of Chardonnay, you can really see more distinctive differences between the sites and the expressions of these vineyards through the maceration. I think that has something to do with the sunshine, the climate, the heat, et cetera, and that maceration tends to help, again, make a more compelling wine that is hopefully more expressive of the place that it's at.
And I just think of tradition as a human sociological term, right? And it comes from, winemaking might be tradition, but if we're back to terroir's first definition of soil and climate, that's the to me, that those don't go. And on top of that, if you look at Bordeaux, who's leading, planting hybrids, I mean, tradition, thanks to global warming, is unfortunately going to be out the window in some things. Again, soil can't change, but soil is, unless you manipulate it, it's there and it is what it is. You've got decomposed granite, or you have schist, or you have Permigian gold, whatever fancy name we have for clay in Russian River Valley. So I don't, that part to me doesn't quite, and maybe I'm just misinterpreting the term tradition, but to me, that's a human sociological thing, whereas terroir is a more fixed mother nature factor.
Any thoughts about that? Okay, 2 more questions, and then if the audience has questions, I may actually have 8 more questions, but I don't think we have enough time. As a winemaker, is there some other product that you would think of that expresses terroir more directly than wine? And I'm going to give you my thought. I think Roquefort cheese is very, very distinct. And you can have a lot of cheeses from all over the world, and they don't taste like that. And you can have a crappy brand, or you can have a very good, I love the brand that's got the butterfly label, and I can't remember, my French is terrible, so I won't try to pronounce it. But is there other products like coffee, tea, beer that you guys would say express terroir? And beer's a really interesting one for me, because I've had, you have Budweiser, which is obviously made, I think now in 7 factories around the world. Every time I've had it, it tastes exactly the same, so no expression of terroir. But you could have a Pilsner in southern Germany that's very specific to the town it's made in. So thoughts of other things that express terroir?
I mean, yeah, coffee is for sure a great example, and something that we're, I think, all exposed to, which is good. And needing to, the most important thing is to search out and find real products made by real people, and not be a Budweiser or Coca-Cola, or that the point is to make them all taste the same. Tea is another category that I can't, really speak to the specific nuances, but the understanding of that specificity of sites and varieties and processing types is, even to, people can argue it goes beyond that of wine, or equals that, So there's a lot of other things you can learn too from other products to speak to wine.
Like cacao.
One of our audience members who's in the marijuana business was just signaling that marijuana is very specific to terroir. If you guys have thoughts on that.
Sure, cacao, cannabis, yeah.
I mean, everything, berries, you go to Washington, you taste strawberries versus stuff grown in the Central Valley, and you're like, oh yeah, some of these taste a lot better than other ones, But again, there has to be a certain level of quality to be able to express that.
Or even like milk, where the cows like graze and what kind of things they eat, or meat in that vein too. Sure.
Sometimes I struggle with the concept of terroir, because if you pay attention to eggs and you get eggs from a non-factory farm, the difference between the summer and the winter seems to be the bigger difference to me than the actual location the hens are what they're eating. Like, you can see a big difference in the yolk color often.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the nut of it, where it's like the farm products, all farm products will express something from that place, right? And we just don't think about it with broccoli as much, It's one way that I explain it. And so, like, with my greens that I grow and my Mohawk red corn and a few other things, like, they're the best that I can find, but that's part of the soil. It's part of also the climate, but it's also because of what I'm doing to the soil and the soil amendment that I make. So again, for me to say what it is that brings that, that's harder to do. But I think it's true with everything, and hops and barley all as well. And it just depends if that gets masked through a manufacturing process or not.
Okay, last question, and I'm gonna make Dr. Khan, what I was told to call you, answer this, and then you can explain the wine too. But we've all talked about it. Like, is climate change obliterating, or maybe obliterating is not the right word, but changing terroir? An easy example would be, if you look at the data, Burgundy harvest has moved up 30 or 40 years, or 30 or 40 days, not years, excuse me, over the last 200 years, very directly with. So there's a declared harvest date in Burgundy It's been tracked since like, I don't know, 1650. Maybe it varies with time, but if you look at the date, it's shifted way up in the calendar. Where it used to be October and 1 out of every 3 vintages in Burgundy wouldn't ripen. Now that's not. Burgundy ripens every year, and harvest starts in August or September. So is the climate change eliminating or changing whatever the concept of terroir is for different wine regions?
It's definitely changing, but harvest data is a very gross metric because compared to 1650s, even to like 1980s, we have much cleaner plants. So things can ripen much more reliably because they do not have that virus load. But what climate change has impacted mostly is the components of the grape berry. It has not all been bad. Like if you compare Bordeaux and Napa together, quality has increased because it's warmer. You can get things riper more reliably, and with more ripeness, you have more alcohol. You can hide more faults. So there's that. But you're at this apex right now that things are coming off this cliff. As it's getting warmer, you're decoupling a lot of these processes. That's what's changing terroir. So your quality will undoubtedly go down, especially for reds, more so than whites.
And actually, I think it kind of ties into this question. So I just poured you guys my 2022 Grenache from my property in Russian River Valley. See, when you live on a place for long enough, and then on top of growing grapes, we really see climate change. When I planted this in 2010, most people said I was fucking insane to plant Grenache here because it was a mold mildew disaster. And it was. We didn't have wind then. The fog wouldn't lift till 10, 11 o'clock in the morning. And it was pretty bad. And today, this summer's turning out to be an anomaly, but normally we rarely see the fog in the morning. And we have 10 to 15 mile winds every day, which we didn't used to have. I planted originally with chain link fences, which I would prefer to put wood so I didn't see my neighbor's abandoned cars in his yard, because I needed the wind flow. And so today, it's been amazing growing. So this year we are seeing some more mold and mildew pressure. I also almost don't spray. You'd think I was growing hybrids. So this vineyard is planted 3 feet by 3 feet spacing. When we say it's hand farmed, there are literally no tractors or machinery because I can't afford it. It's not a big enough property. My little farm animals that help me do that. 25% whole cluster, which is a winemaking thing that adds and changes the components of the wine composted terroir, and 10 months of neutral punching.
I wanted to add to that question. I think that terroir is going to change, right? Of course, but what are we? Am I identifying with Russian River Valley? Because that's going to change. It won't be Russian River Valley terroir anymore, what we know as. But we'll still have the Fulton terroir, whatever that's going to be. So there will always be terroir. It's just going to change from our preconceived notions of what we thought it was, theoretically.
Okay, Andrew's signaling me 5 minutes. So I will ask in 1 second if there's any audience questions, but I would love each of you guys to tell if I were a novice kind of seeking the concept of terroir, what, very specific wine or what region would you say has the most terroir driven wines?
Chablis, where you can walk 10 feet and that's considered, a whole different name, a different thing. And it's Chardonnay, mostly made in stainless steel. So you've got limited vinifications. That was for me, one of my first most eye-opening experiences. I got a tour of Chablis and it's like, holy shit. In 500 feet, there's like 5 different named wines and I could perceive some differences.
Yeah, I think I kind of agree with that. It's this is the oak. I would think again, a white wine, you're kind of minimizing maybe some of the winemaking techniques there, or anywhere that it's kind of very similar. You could look at Piedmont. There's aging and other stuff, but anywhere that the winemaking is relatively consistent or regulated, such that the production is similar, so then you can explore differences throughout either domains or the wineries or the vineyards themselves.
I'm not ready to make a big comment there because I consider myself a novice on worldwide wines. I'm a farm kid basically, but Mount Etna, I think those wines of Italy, of Sicily, are really speak to me. Maybe it's just my palate loves them, but they all seem to be amazing.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with the Chablis as well. I mean, that's probably as close as you can get tasting something different.
Yeah, I'm gonna go on with the Chablis too. I mean, it's a smaller region. It's more stainless steel, but I would also add on Alsace. I think it's a really interesting terroir, and although there's a lot of different winemaking styles, like a lot of skin contact, which I love, but I think it's a great terroir. You could pick it out.
I guess if I could jump in real quick, maybe Russian River Valley Pinot, you can taste the difference between Francois Frere, Sarug, all the different oak forests in France. So
Once we bring oak into the question and that whole terroir that's in addition to wine, that's a whole nother layer.
I chose not to speak about oak because I think there is a whole terroir discussion around oak. Next year, if we do this event again, we will do a focus tasting on a single vineyard with multiple winemakers, because I think that's another interesting, really way to explore terroir, because then you have a very specific location, and at the same time you have different expressions. And if we all win the lottery between now and next year, it'll be Clos Saint Jacques and Burgundy, because that's my favorite. But otherwise, maybe it'll be Russian River, Pinot, or something. How about any quick audience questions on terroir?
It's not a question, but if you wanted to try different wines from the same vineyard but different winemakers, there are a few examples right now that are here that you can taste out and around. Well, it sounds like you're kind of poo-pooing carbonic maceration a little bit, but then you all said the true representation of terroir is direct press winemaking. So does that mean direct press winemaking is the only way to show terroir, or is more whole cluster or on the skins okay?
I was the one poo-pooing carbonic.
Yeah. And we
I'm thankful.
we didn't get into all that. I mean, just for example, white wine, we never whole cluster press. In 16 years, we firmly believe, and that's just our philosophy. It doesn't make it right or wrong. We firmly believe in crush, destem, sit on skins, and then age on heavy solids. But that to me is a winemaking thing that can override terroir.
I think it's a very interesting thing on white wines, because if you look historically, our concept of white wine is not historically correct, because the modern day press gave you the fractions, which means enough juice, because it could press hard enough so that we make white wine. Like if you go back 150 years in Burgundy, orange wine was the white wine. Everything was macerated because it was much easier to press. 200 years. I think, and I'm going to express my own opinion here for a second, the white wine is probably the purest expression of terroir, because there are a few choices up front, but there's a lot of choices that the winemaker no longer makes, and the wine expresses itself. And the best example, when I was spending time in Burgundy, a winemaker, and I actually think this is true, told me that Chardonnay is actually the absolute best expression of terroir, because it's the one that shows the most influence of the winemaker. And she said that if you sneeze while you're walking by a barrel, when you taste that barrel 2 years later, you know that's the barrel you sneezed by. I'm not sure she was right. She's a very famous winemaker. She also believes in terroir and French oak, but beats her vines with a Louisville Slugger, which is not French oak. Any other questions? Ken?
You're talking about whether orange wine or carbonic can mask terroir. I'm wondering about Brandt, because I've had a lot of bready wines. I've made some bready wines myself, and I know sometimes the Brett can come from the vineyard, but it's more often from the winery. So, what do you guys feel about Brett masking terroir?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, it gets into that idea of what is terroir. I don't want to beat that on the head, but I think this kind of speaks to either the climate change or carbonic or other things. It's really, terroir relies on expertise and a familiarity with something. I mean, people say the same thing about natural wines. Oh, the VA is too high. You only taste faults, etc. But if you drink a lot of those wines, you become accustomed to it, and you can find variants within it. Same thing with Brett. You're like, oh, this is a really nice Brett. This is kind of Band-Aidy Brett. This is horsey Brett. This is a Brett that ages well. It's one that gets worse. It gets less. And so there's a whole expertise or understanding of Brett that you can have that you can personally feel enhances a wine or detracts from a wine, depending on your opinion. I think the same thing is true with carbonic maceration. It's just that there's not enough of it, and we're not as, you know, you don't have as much experience with it to notice the subtle differences between it, which, you know, because if I taste the Pinot from Burgundy, oh, is it this vineyard or that vineyard? I don't know. It tastes like oak to me because I don't drink enough oaky wines, right? But
You just have to give it some time so the oak results.
yeah. If you do and you're habituated to it, then you can see the differences through that. Similar to, I'm more or less habituated to higher VAs, so I can taste differences through that someone else who doesn't have that experience can't necessarily. So similar with Brettanomyces. I mean, I love it in some places, but sometimes you taste it and you're like, oh yeah, this isn't my cup of tea.
I'd like to share on the back. I so agree with it.
Yeah, switch.
Thank you. You know, like some wines, if you believe that most of terroir is actually microbiology, then that can also be important. You know, like Chateauneuf de Pape, Boucassel. Someone asked me what my favorite wine is, and you know, of my limited scope, I love that because it's funky in a very beautiful way, and I don't know what it would taste like if it didn't have that level of funk. So that's part of it, right? And they've certainly made a name based on that. So it's just a matter of, like Shaunt's offering, is it a spiky funk? Like, do I notice Brett as a high tone? You know, I always think of it as the way a heart looks like on one of those meters. You know, if you got all these high tones where you notice those of just Brett, then that's too much, right? It's covering up terroir. But when it's integrated, it's a piece of terroir. It's one way to look at it.
Okay, with that, I think Andrew, our taskmaster, is going to end our discussion. The next discussion is on flaws in wine. There's already been some online debate. It'll be really fun. I don't know if anybody's on this panel, on that next panel, but I want to thank the panel for coming here. Thank you guys from the audience. Great job.
I just want to say that there's an incredible collection of winemaking talent here in front of you, right? I mean, this is a really special talk. I mean, I was just introduced to Khan's wines today, everybody else's wines I know. And so these are, I mean, Leslunes great. These are very talented people who are dedicated to making unique wines that express their philosophy and personalities really directly. And that's why they're here. So I want to give an extra round of applause for everybody here. That's like really special to have you all gathered here today. Thank you. And we were kind of flirting with the idea of flaws right there, right? Like, so, and that's the next panel, which is like, when does a flaw, you know, cross the line from being additive to negative, right? And that's a subjective thing. And that's our next panel, which will be up in about 5-10 minutes. So thank you all. We're also having an after party at Banter Wine Bar. So after this is all over, if you want to have a more intimate conversation with everybody here or whoever stays, we'll be heading over to Banter afterwards.
Thanks for listening today. This was a great discussion about the complexities of terroir, and I love hearing how different producers express it in their wines. Kristy, Jared, Shaunt, and William have appeared on previous episodes of the podcast also, if you feel like diving deeper into their wines and thoughts. Next week, we'll have the third and last panel of the inaugural Unfiltered Festival. Does natural wine romanticize flaws? I know you'll enjoy it. You can follow the podcast on wherever you're listening and the Instagram at Indie Wine Podcast. And feel free to email indiewinepodcast@gmail.com with comments, questions, or feedback. If you're enjoying the podcast, I'd love if you told a friend or wine lover about it and help spread the word. Rating, reviewing, or donating at patreon.com/indiewinepodcast helps also. It all goes to offsetting podcast expenses like gas money, podcast hosting, research books, and websites, and allows for more episodes. We'll be back soon with another episode. Have a good one.